Brother, what's your name? All right. Oh, I didn't see her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for recognizing an African American woman and
Yes,
a
ma'am.
mother.
Yes, ma'am. I got you.
I want to speak to the issue of recognizing and preserving our history. If we don't recognize it, if we don't document it, it is going to be lost. I want to say immediately that we have to look at the past before Martin Luther King Jr. And I raised the name of Ralph Johnson Bunch. Ralph Johnson Bunch is not mentioned in any of the history. The highest level American at the United Nations, 1945, actually helped write the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The man who marched in the Civil Rights Movement, born in Detroit.
Born in Detroit.
Baptized in Second Baptist Church.
Thank you for the history.
Walked the streets of Detroit.
So
and yet he is not mentioned anywhere. And last of all,
well,
Nobel Prize winner, the first African American to win the Nobel
Let's
Peace
give some
Prize,
applause for that.
born in Detroit. We must recognize that history and not forget it.
Duly
and
noted.
we must preserve it.
Duly noted. Thank you for your comment. That's the last comment. I need questions. Thank you. This brother was here next. And who do you direct the question to?
The Honorable Judge here. I had the privilege of attending that fine university a couple blocks down the street here.
Yes. Great institution.
Yes.
Yeah, and just about a little bit about me real quick. Household income, well over 6 figures. Wife and I went down there. She got a master's degree from Central Michigan. September 13th of this year, my son turned 16. Bought him a brand spanking new Chevy Malibu. I had to give him the talk. Some of y'all know what the talk is.
Yes.
When you get a black man a beautiful car like that and hand him a driver's license. To you, Judge, since you're on the justice side of it, how do I, with these degrees on the wall, my wife and I, how do we really reconcile our success with the realities of America to that young 16-year-old?
It's very difficult, but you have to, as the young lady before you said, he's got to know his history, and he's got to read. One of the pitfalls of what has happened with our public schools, with the competition from charter schools, is that the Detroit public schools, I used to represent them years ago, and it had 180,000 students. Now it's got 45, 46,000 in its new drafted way of organization. And there were struggles that were waged by community activists to have a Negro History Week back in the late 50s, early 60s. Mrs. Helen Kelly, who was a longtime board member of New Detroit and a community activist, was one of the strongest voices and other educators to have a Black History, Negro History Week, which later became Black History Month. One of the problems in the educational system is that our young people are not being guided in terms of not just education, but survival. How to talk with people when they're stopped by a police officer. Don't get all riled and upset. Well, why are you stopping me? I didn't do it. No. Yes, sir. Officer, what is it? Inquire. Be courteous. Because, see, you don't know, now that we bring police officers in from all over Michigan, some have never seen a African American other than on TV or in a newspaper until they come to Detroit and train. And then they join the force, and they're confronted with a situation where they don't really know. They have had no contact culturally with black folk. So as a consequence, they may be as scared of that person they stopped as that person who was stopped is scared of them. So we have to begin to understand how to defuse situations. But then, of course, you always have people who have strong racism, anger at whatever the situation is, and they embody it in that person who happens to be black.
So really quickly, I want to make sure that we leave room for others. I hate to cut you off. But
well, let me finish it,
okay.
If I would, 2 seconds.
Okay.
Have him count to 5, 10 before he answers, and answer like he's talking to you when he's talking to the police officer. And
so
he'll be fine.
So I know Kim was itching to get in there, but one thing I do want to point out is that sometimes the interaction with the police is not always a black and white issue. There, for example, in the instance of the Freddie Gray case, some of those police officers were black. And so we also know that there's layers to this, and it's not always a cut and dry black or white thing. I just wanted to mention that. Kim, really quickly, you had a comment?
Now, I just want to, again, talking about framing, because when you asked the question earlier about what person represents OJ, for, the person who came to mind for me was Sandra Bland. Because Sandra Bland was having a bad day because she got pulled over for a ticket, and there were a lot of people, black and white, who said, well, she had an attitude, as if that's an explanation for why she lost her life. Right. And so what we have to do when we're changing the frame is say, yes, I have an 8-year-old child. At some point, he'll have a driver's license. So yes, there are self-preservation things that we have to teach them, but we have to continue to challenge the systems of oppression that allow people who have a badge to say, oh, because you're having a bad day and you have an attitude, you can lose your life today. So that's where, I just think we have to be really passionate. That's where Black Lives Matter is really important.
I keep hearing a recurring theme, education, and it's not just school-based education. Right? It's the education of people, and I think that's a valid point that you're making. Brother here, state your name, your question, who it's directed to, question.
My name is Charles Willis, and this is open to the panel. I taught in the Detroit public school system and then into the other public school systems around metropolitan Detroit. And there was something that came up, and I just want to know your take on it. How do we deal with this false sense of entitlement that the children seem to just come into school with? They assume that I owe them my life, my education, my dedication, my money, my time, my compassion, and then there's nothing to reciprocate.
So the sense of false entitlement for young people. I think I'd like Terence to chime in on that, and then I'd like Peter Hammer to chime in on that too.
One of the things that come to mind when you said entitlement, obviously our young people don't have the same level of grit that maybe we had. They didn't go through the same things that I know I experienced as a child. So oftentimes they do come in with a sense of entitlement, but oftentimes if we have a relationship, and this is what America needs to understand, we lack relationship. So if we have a relationship with these young people, they will tell you what's going on in their life, which is why they're coming in with certain attitudes and certain demeanor, because maybe they're hungry. So if you're hungry, you're homeless, you ain't thinking about homework. Maybe that kid been molested. Maybe that kid just needs somebody to say, I believe in you. Maybe that kid needs somebody to say, hey, have a good day. How was your test scores? We get home safely. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We got to pour into our young people, stop beating them down. I'm not saying you doing it, brother, but as a whole. And I'll say this one last thing, Marlo. I don't want to see any more mega churches being built if we ain't building mega rec centers. If we ain't building mega homeless shelters, mega food pantries. I don't want to see another mega church being built.
Terence, everyone. I love this guy. Peter, if you could give us some perspective around that question.
It's a hard act to follow, but thank you for your service as a teacher, because we're not respecting our teachers as we need to as well, and your service is incredibly important. I mean, the thing I bring to the table is to try to see the system as well as the individual. So when I hear about the sort of Detroit public schools, my immediate thought goes to a dysfunctional state policy. The core of what's going wrong in Detroit public schools is a flawed state finance formula, which is compounded with a flawed charter school, which I wrote over 5 years ago was a death spiral for the Detroit public schools, which they could not pull out of. Right? A wonderful coalition effort was put together that put realistic recommendations forward, and a majority Republican legislature failed to do its responsibility and address any one of those core structural issues. Right? So there's a really, I'm going to make this one of these sort of public predictions. Without addressing the charter schools or the school finance formula, the Detroit Public Schools is a ticking time bomb because the structural problems have not been addressed. It will be 3 years, 5 years, 7 years when the death spiral starts again and we start to get into structural deficits. But look at what they've done, right? They've turned, allegedly, the school system back to democratic governance in Detroit. They've given it a system that cannot succeed structurally, and they already have the remedy for when it fails. Right, so it's those racialized narratives, it's those belief systems that dictate the systems in the institutions that really have to be our focus. And if we're not thinking about these systemic approaches and the way that the belief systems are influencing the institutions, and then the failure of the policies rationalize the racist beliefs that are underlying them, we're missing it. Right, and if we're not having a good school system, we can't deal with our kids as mad as we try.
So. Really quickly, I'm going to put Dr. Peters in, but I'm hearing some recurrent themes. Pour into our kids, investment, respect them, treat them like they matter, right? I think those are some of the things, but then it's also looking at some of the structures that are in place, right, that are going to create pathways of prosperity. Man, young people, they have so much magic inside of them. Dr. Peters, really quickly.
The young people are as intelligent as young people have ever been, you know. But we live in a grossly materialistic society, okay? We live in a society that is extremely racist, especially in terms of curriculum, okay? We know that these things exist. You as a teacher, it's your job to have a syllabus and an intro that allows the students to feel who you are. You know, you don't wait to just react. You know, when I taught, I controlled my classroom. You know, I've come up in there. This is what it's going to be. This is how it's going to play here. Okay, you do that. Okay, and you, by whatever means necessary, you teach to the needs of the students. Right. You know what I mean? You don't. When I taught hip hop, I wouldn't teach Jay-Z if I'm trying to teach respect for black women. If I'm trying to teach black women to respect themselves, I'm not playing Beyonce videos. I'm not teaching hoes, you know. I'm talking about values as if they're my children, you know. But you teach to what you know the needs are. And don't just wait to react. I mean, you got to make them feel you, homie, you know.
All right. I'm just going to sip my cup of tea after that. All right, young lady, your name, who your question is to, and it's a question, not a statement.
I know you're looking at my paper. I'm not going to read it.
I see your paper. Keep it down.
My name is Michelle Jones. I am a certified prevention specialist that works in some of our middle and high schools. And the issue that I'm running into is I'm looking for a resurrection of a sense of cultural pride in our young people. How do we resurrect that when what they're seeing on the TV is not positive images of black families, but an image of a black family where each one is after each other's throat? I'm trying not to make a statement. I'll just try to make it a question, but I have to give you some understanding where I'm coming from. When I talk to our young people and I say, what do you want to do when you graduate? I'm getting things, no one's interested in political science. They're scared of it. But I'm getting, I want to be a singer, and you don't know how to read music. I want to be a producer, and you can't do basic math, okay? And they're looking at these images that are being projected to them. Also, how do we change that curriculum? You spoke about the curriculum. That's part of the issue.
So your
Dr.
question,
Peters said that, bringing in the old stuff that was done that gave a sense of pride, okay? But when they are dealing with textbooks that don't address us in any way, and they're supposed to be preparing to pass standardized tests, but it hasn't dealt with who they are.
so I need you to get to the question.
How do we resurrect a sense of cultural pride in our young people?
And in education.
Yes.
Got it. Dr. Arbulu, could you please take that?
I'm thinking about this because this raises some real issues from my perspective. You think about where they come from, where are they coming from, and then they go to school. And if you think of their home lives, what's there? And there may not be structure. They may not have jobs, the parents, or they're living from day to day. So what ends up happening is the school ends up being the parent also, unnecessarily, but it's true. So how do we address that? And then I think we have to think about wraparound services. I think we can't necessarily just ignore and stop and say, well, so you have what's taking place at home, but school is just about learning. That's no longer happening. The fact of the matter is, I have a son that's a social worker, and he comes home and he tells me, Dad, I have children that haven't eaten. I have children that barely have clothes on. All of a sudden, we got to think outside the box and think about how we provide wraparound service. That's a reality. And if we don't start thinking how we can operate in the 21st century, given the challenges that we exist, but we're going to have children, a lost generation. So I do think that we've got to think outside the box. Think about these wraparound services, because that is what's taking place in our urban school settings. And we just cannot think in the same way as suburbs. They have different challenges there.
Yes.
But we have challenges here, and we have to be a lot more comprehensive in our approach.
So Shirley's going to jump in, then Tarence.
Say that there are a lot of, I say, social impact organizations. I don't say nonprofit anymore because nobody describes themselves as what they're not. Where organizations like Bank of America fund them to do exactly the kind of thing you're talking about now. We have to, if a young person says, I want to be a singer, we have to show them what it takes to be a singer. And then when they decide, no, I don't want to do that, that's progress. So there are a lot of organizations that are doing this work, and just, you can go through and find them. And they will help you, because that's really what they do. And like I said, a lot of them are funded to do that. Really, really important. We have a program where we teach kids about entrepreneurship. And many of them will say, I didn't really know that's what it took. I don't think I want to do that anymore. And people think, oh, that's not bad. It's a good thing, because our kids really don't know what it takes to do the things. They have to really, really be able to see it in order to be it. And see it means really getting some additional information. So,
thank you.
Tarence, real quick.
I would say that ethical care is important. Kids are smart. These kids understand when people don't like them. They understand when you're not authentic, when you really don't care about my education. I'd also say passion-based curriculum, that if a kid is interested in something, you gear more towards that curriculum, towards what that kid is into. That kid will come and run through a wall for you each and every day. I would say that oftentimes adults would quit if they went through half the stuff our kids go through just to get to you each and every day. That kid needs to know that you love them, that you have a high expectation of learning, that this is a translation of education when you walk into this safe haven. To his point, to Peter's point, schools are safe havens. School is your new rec center. School is everything. We keep kids to 7 o'clock at night, and that's say last meal, wait so you have some dinner on your way home. Kids are doing homework off the dome light in the car because they're homeless. It's kids that's being molested each and every day. They innovate just to get to you, and I'll be damned if we fail them.
All right. Thank you, Tarence. All right, so I got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that you guys did a great job. The bad news is that we only have time for 2 more questions. We're on a time limit. Sir, I need you to ask your question, direct it at one individual, make it a question fast. Sorry.
Gene Cunningham. Dr. King described the United States as the biggest perpetrator of violence and chaos in the modern world. Is that still true today? Anybody can take a piece of it.
Who wants to take that?
I'll say a few things.
All right, only one person can take it because we're on the time
Sort of
limit.
quick. I mean, to go back to our elders like Dr. King, and he talked about the triplets of evil, the sort of militarism, materialism, and racism. And we talk about criminal justice, we have to look at the intersection of racism and militarism, because that's really what it is, and we've got to connect the dots of what's happening with the police, what's happening with Islamophobia, what's happening with the immigrants, what's happening with our foreign affairs, and see the interconnectivity of those so we can focus on the core logic, which is really racism and various forms of militarism. So those are with us. I often, when I teach, say that we brought the Vietnam War home on the war on crimes and then the war on drugs. And it really is a continuation of that type of flawed ways of thinking based upon fear and insecurity, the root of many of those sets of problems.
Thank you. Young lady, last question of the night.
All right, I've been standing here trying to formulate this into a question. But I want to look at future. And it's a future that our young people will have, and it's a future that we're supposed to be providing for them. And not providing as far as giving them stuff, but at least making sure that they have a planet to live on that will continue to sustain them. So my question is, if we grow up and finally understand that there is no such thing as race, there's only one race, the human race. And the problem with the disparity among human beings on the face of this earth is a result of greed and a result of fear. Once we can get past that and we can understand that these institutions that we have are not going to serve us justly in any way, shape, or form because they were built on injustice. So we need to build some new institutions. So my question is to the group, where do we go? Because this is the question, where do we go from here? Do we keep on with these same institutions?
I gotta
or
cut
do
you.
we make a new way for a new people, the young people?
Okay, he wants to take this. And Shirley, I want you to jump in on this because after him, really quick, because he.
Very quickly, I think one of the things that we have to think about in terms of policy is how we can, in the actions that we begin to take and formulate, how can we develop racial equity impact assessments, doing across board, because we do have the realities of these disparities in our community. But policies need to be set up from a perspective of racial equity. And we need to be considering that when we are developing them and implementing them. And yet, we are afraid of taking that step. I think if we're going to ever really make progress, we have to think about an approach that incorporates a racial equity assessment tool in whatever actions we take.
Shirley, jump in, and then
I
I'm
always
going to
say
wrap up.
change really comes from the inside out. It comes from you. And I say that each of us has the opportunity to make change. Each of us can do something, whether it's saying, I don't want to hear that joke, or whether it's speaking up when you know you could. Each of us can do something. And so I say, it starts with me, and it starts with you.
So thank you, thank you. So really quickly, before everyone leaves, really quickly, we got a little bit of housekeeping. There's something that I always believe in. I believe in giving people something to do when they leave. I don't believe in engaging people and not activating. Each individual here represents not only an organization, they represent communities, they represent themselves. They're doing amazing work. Get connected to their organizations. Get involved if you have questions, if you want to change systems, if you want to shift paradigms. I'm a solution-driven guy. Yeah, I think it's jacked up out here, but I'm an action-oriented guy. So I think that these people up here are resources. The second thing is that I represent the Detroit 67 Project, and it's really culminating with looking back at the history of Detroit through the lens of 1967, the summer of civil unrest, the riot, the rebellion, the uprising, and getting people to recognize that it wasn't 5 days that just changed everything. It was a 50-year, 100-year track and story that led up to that week. And then there was a story of 50 years after Shirley said the story started. And then there's the now. And then what we do to look forward, as she said, to the year 2067, right? And so engagement, reflecting on our history, looking back so we can move forward and taking real action. This project is a multi-year community engagement project, and we're trying to have more dialogue like this. Organizations like New Detroit, organizations like Wayne State, working with Peter with the Deal, Detroit Equity Action Lab. We're trying to find solutions to move us forward. But we have to give respect to what happened. We have to tell the story, not his story, our story. My mother, again, the last quote I'll say, always tells me, every time we lose a black elder and they pass away, part of our history dies with them because we're not capturing it. We're doing the world's largest oral history on this topic of Detroit 67, and we can get your oral histories. We want people involved. Go to Detroit1967.org. And I'm not doing it as a shameless plug. I want people to leave with something to do.